first want to thank our honored guests for being with us tonight, as well as our students who are bringing their intellect and their faith to this moment. Special thanks to the Reverend Dr. John for bringing us all together into this setting. We come from many faith traditions, or from no particular faith tradition at all. Moments throughout human history, those differences have tragically been sources of division, suspicion, and hatred. Yet, at many other moments, we are able to look beyond the outward differences to realize the core common beliefs that bring us together. A beautiful expression of these values is found in my faith in the Apostle Paul's letter to the Galatians. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. These words and other beautiful words from other traditions remind us that even in our most human of moments, we all carry and share the spark of the divine. The prophet Abraham is revered by all three of the faiths represented on the stage this evening. So in the unifying spirit of Father Abraham, welcome.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It is my honor to introduce Imam Bashir Jahij, an Imam, university professor, public speaker, author, and professional development trainer. He completed his advanced Islamic studies in Algeria, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia before relocating to the United States in 2003. With his expertise in Islamic studies, life coaching, and neuro-linguistic programming, he currently holds the position of Imam and religious director at the Quad Cities Islamic Center in Moline, Illinois, an online adjunct professor of Islamic studies at Guidance University. Additionally, he has been actively involved in interfaith work for over 20 years, advocating for unity and mutual understanding among different faith communities. He has given lectures on religious matters and personal and professional growth both nationally and internationally. Imam Bashir resides with his wife and 3 children in East Moline.
It is my honor to introduce our next partner in conversation, Rabbi Jenny Bundy. Rabbi Jenny Bundy is the spiritual leader of Temple Shalom, a Reformed synagogue in Galesburg, Illinois. She was ordained from the Academy of Jewish Religion, California in 2023, and wrote her master's thesis on intergenerational dialogue. Rabbi Bundy also serves as a chaplain at OSF, St. Mary's Medical Center in Galesburg.
Hello. It is my honor to introduce our next guest, Reverend Dr. John Huxtable. Reverend Dr. John Huxtable graduated from Monmouth College in 2004. He served Verdon First Christian Church from August 2004 to December 2022. He received his Master's of Divinity degree in 2011 and his Doctorate in Ministry degree in 2021, each from Eden Theological Seminary. He returned to Monmouth College on January 2023. He is committed to social justice, ministry, and breaking down barriers through ecumenical and interfaith dialogue. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Dr. John Huxtable.
Hello, everyone. I am introducing Dr. Joshua Levi Ianjinsky. He is an assistant professor of religious studies here at Monmouth College. Joshua's research explores comparative mysticism, religion, ecology, and the relationship between spiritual practice and creativity. So please help me welcome Dr. Joshua Levi Ianjinsky up to the stage.
So I'd like to extend my deep gratitude to Dr. Jahish, Rabbi Bundy, and Reverend Dr. Huxtable for generously gifting us with their time and their wisdom this evening. And I would like to extend a heartfelt welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us in this exciting opportunity to listen, to learn, and to question. I would like to stress that each of us tonight is, in our own unique way, participating in a dialogue that is at once pressingly timely and, on the other hand, deeply historical. So in honor of the historical breadth and depth of this conversation between communities of faith, I would like to briefly comment on the complexities at play in an interfaith endeavor with the help from a few luminaries of the past. To begin, I would like to read some words from the 13th century Andalusian Islamic polymath Ibn al-Arabi. My heart has become capable of every form. It is a pasture for gazelles, and a convent for Christian monks, and a temple for idols, and the pilgrim's kebab. And the tables of the Torah and the book of the Quran, I follow the religion of love. Whatever way love's camels take, that is my religion and my faith. Ibn al-Arabi speaks to a vision of overcoming formal differences through love. But here, love is invoked not merely as an emotion in a modern-day psychological sense, but, moreover, as a way of knowing and a way of being in the world. For one can only know love by being transformed by love. Although distanced by time and culture, one finds a similar sentiment expressed, albeit more plainly, in the words of the 17th century German shoemaker turned Christian mystic, Jakob Böhme. When the veil is removed from your eyes, so that you see and so that you know, then you will also see and know all your brothers, whether Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or pagan. Or do you think that God is God only of the Christians? No, the others too, they live in God. This vision of unity beautifully expresses one side of a truth revealed through interfaith dialogue. When seen through the eyes of the heart, we are part of one human community. Yet, as the 20th century Austrian Jewish philosopher Martin Buber would remind us, to love someone means to want to embrace someone with all their distances. The second truth, then, is that we must honor the very real differences that define us as individuals and as communities. Interfaith dialogue is quintessentially relational, a dance between communicating our commonalities and daring to embrace our differences. And if it is to be a real conversation, opening up to the other is not without risk. After all, as the French linguist Émile Benaviste famously observed, hospitality and hostility share the same root, hostis, which can mean both host and guest, friend and enemy. As I see it then, the ethical challenge in interfaith dialogue lies in learning to practice hospitality by listening and by learning from the other in light of our shared humanity, while avoiding the hostility of reducing the other's worldview to fit just a bit more comfortably within our own. And this is a real danger. After all, I think it's fair to say that at times we all tend to become prisoners of our limited perspectives. But I would like to close with a parable from the philosopher Simone Weil. Two prisoners whose cells adjoin communicate with each other by knocking on the wall. The wall is the thing which separates them, but it is also their means of communication. Every separation is a link. And I would now like to ask our speakers to offer a few words about why they find interfaith dialogue important. Thank you.
Well, hi everybody. So when I was thinking about why interfaith dialogue is important, I thought of some selfish reasons and then some selfless reasons. So from the selfish side, what I thought about is that when we have interfaith dialogue, it can strengthen my own faith and everybody else's because it challenges assumptions. If my ideas of God and religion are different than my people I'm in dialogue with, it's going to challenge me and allow me to deepen my faith. And there's also sort of almost a safety perspective. So when I'm teaching people about my faith tradition and then I'm learning about theirs, it allows us to make a more welcoming and accommodating world for everybody, including people of my faith tradition. On the selfless side, what I love about interfaith dialogue is it teaches us how to lean into discomfort. No religion exists in a vacuum. All of our religions have learned and shared and possibly stolen bits of tradition and practice from each other, and it's wonderful to learn those kinds of things. It can make us uncomfortable sometimes, and discomfort is a way that we grow. And I think the biggest thing about interfaith dialogue is it teaches us how to engage with open curiosity. An idea of we're not trying to change anybody's mind, but really how to learn from others and really learn how to listen.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Peace, blessing, God be with you all. So why interfaith is important? I would love to share with you a few verses from the Quran. I will recite them in Arabic, then do some translation, and I reflect on some of the meanings. The first thing, one of the ayat, which is verses called Surah Al-Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. This is the verses from Surah An-Nisa, called the chapter of women. All mankind, we created you from a single person, and we made you from a female and male, and made you tribes and nations to know each other, which is in the Surah Al-Hujurat. So what's the purpose? Basically, the Quran calling us to go back to our origin. Our origin, God created us from a single person. We believe that God created the first man, who was a man, not a monkey, you know that. Adam, peace be upon him, and created Eve from him. So we all go back to that man, to that person. We have to bring our communities together to the roots to live in peace, tranquility, and understanding each other. Without understanding each other, the troubles will start. That's what we need the religion basically to work on, filling the gap between the faiths, the communities, and bring them together to live in peace, to understand each other, to respect each other, to live that coexistence. Because God created us different. Nobody can bring us together as one single copy. It's impossible. One of the verses, God said, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ, and they will remain different. And that's why He created them. So one of the signs of God in His creation, we are different, and we cannot be the same copy, certified copy. So when we are different, we will have a better life. We will have a better understanding. We will have a better sense of living. As you see different flowers, different fruits, different stuff in the world. That's how Allah created us differently. And the message for us to go back to our roots, to our first father, to the revelation, which is basically from the same source. And in the Quranic worldview, we focus on three main things, which are God, the Creator, and the universe, which God created and established as the vicegerent here, and also the revelation, which is the guidance for a human being. And revelation never stopped. That's why the message of Muhammad, the message of Quran, is a continuation for the messages before him. The message of Jesus is upon him, and the message of Moses is upon them all. Thank you.
So it's my turn. I don't sit still well, so bear with me. I'm all over the place here. But why interface is important to me actually began in a classroom at Monmouth College. Carolyn Sudas showed me a documentary on a Trappist monk from Kentucky that was named, his name was Thomas Merton, and it changed my life because Merton had an epiphany on the corner of 4th and Walnut. And in that epiphany, he saw all the people walking around, and he said they shined like the sun. And he just wanted to tell them how blessed they were to be God's creation. So that moved me to begin this journey of discernment, but it also moved me to start to truly reflect on the importance of having these dialogues. We live in a time and a culture where tribalism is becoming dominant, where we pick sides or we make everything dualistic, it's black or white, good or evil. And what has happened because of that is we've pushed into this us against them mentality. And I believe that if we truly see God's creation as if we're called to see it, we understand that we are different. All of us are very different. But that's a blessing in many ways. And it's a gift because we learn how to learn from and with each other. This is a gift that each of these two beautiful people have given me to join with me on the stage. Anybody who's been around me in the last week has heard that this is my dream, that we have these conversations on a regular basis, because we can no longer allow to push the conversation off. We have to have the important conversations so we can learn to live with and grow with, and also honor our differences. So that's how I look at it.
So at this point, we're going to jump to some questions that were sent in to us by students, and we got some really great questions, and we had a really good problem on our hands, which is that we got too many good questions. So I do very much apologize. We only have a limited amount of time, so if we don't get to your question, I'm very sorry about that. But we'll see. And after this, by the way, we're going to open things up so that everybody in the audience has a chance to bring their voice to this conversation as well. So the first question is, how did you decide to be a religious leader? We'll start with the easy one.
My story is from about 8 or 9 years ago, and I have some members of my congregation in the audience, and they know my family had a really, really tough, intense couple of years. We had just a lot going on personally, and And my congregation, my synagogue really kept our family afloat. They brought us meals when we needed it. They took us to doctor's appointments. They took care of our kids. They showed me in a truly beautiful and deep way what community is all about, and really showed how much a faith community can do, and the power of, for me, the Jewish community. And I don't like to say that things happen for a reason, because sometimes things that are really terrible happen, but I do like to think we can make meaning out of rough things and terrible things. So my way of making meaning out of the challenges that my family had was to become a rabbi so that I could help strengthen my Jewish community and other Jewish communities as well.
It's good. My decision goes back like in 2 decades ago. I was in Malaysia doing my PhD in Islamic Studies at the International Islamic University of Malaysia. It was a symposium organized by the US Embassy in Kuala Lumpur and the International University. And I remember the dean of the faculty told me if you could go and represent us. I went, and the theme of the symposium was religious diversity in America. And that's my first time I heard some people from here. At that time, there is no this technology that's called teleconferencing. So they spoke from Washington, D.C. And I remember some people interview people on the street about asking them, what do you know about Islam? Okay, this is in America in 2000, maybe in the 90s. Some of them said, this is an ancient religion. It's gone, not anymore. Some people, they said, I have no idea about that. And some of them, they said, this is a Middle Eastern religion, okay? So in that moment, they said, wow, that's a good place to go and discuss with people I know in the Quran. And the Quran talk about the Jews and the Christian and different, especially the Jews and the Christian, and honor them as the people of the book. And we share a lot of income in common. So he said, this is a good environment to go and share what we have and to learn from different people, as I heard them talking in a really polite and really nice way. So he came. I was scared, by the way, when I came after in 2003. Later on after 11 September, I was scared to come here because the picture of America at the time in the Middle East was really, scary. So you go there, they put you in prison. Maybe, the story. So when he came, I remember in Seattle, Washington. So the person in the custom was speaking Arabic to me. He spent years in Egypt, a white American, and talked to me so politely. And he told me, don't open any language, just go and pass, go. That was a really good introduction for me when I came here. It was amazing. So that's how, since then, I started working as imam in Indiana, in Seattle at the time, working part-time with them in Indiana, Florida, Connecticut here. We had a great time working with different faith communities, especially the Jewish and the Christian, even the Buddhists, Hindus and stuff like that. I love that, approach, and I never regret that. Thank you.
And I will honestly say I never regretted it. I had doubts, but I never regretted it. And once again, I always want to make sure that whenever I ask a question like this, people understand that for my decision to come to fruition in my discernment process, it was a village that took place, and I think it started long before I knew it in that sense, if that makes sense. I was raised by amazing, strong women. My mother and my grandmother, who played the organ for our Catholic Church. By the way, until she died, she wrote me letters saying you make a great deacon in the Catholic Church. But I did some things, right? And I went through some really rough times. All of my students know, I think all of Monmouth knows, I'm a drunk, a recovering alcoholic. And so when I was told by, once again, Carolyn Suda to take this Old Testament class, and I asked why, And she said, because everything you write is spiritual. And I said, not to my knowledge, kind of a thing, right? And lo and behold, I took the Old Testament class and I've never gotten out of it. Because, like each of you have shared, it grabs hold of you. And I had a dear friend tell me in the discernment process, if you can ever picture yourself doing something else, do it. And for close to 25 years, I can't picture myself doing anything else. And it's, come to fruition tonight. And just almost, I'm getting old. But yeah, it's just, it's hard to explain. But you feel it and you know it in your heart. So it drew me. There were definite times that I went home from seminary class and told my wife that I'm done with this crap. And pardon my language. But by the grace of God, we get through it. And we get through it as a village. And so that's what led me in, why I chose it. And very much like the share, I do not regret it at all.
Thank you very much for those answers. So then let's come to our second question, which is, what are the challenges of entering into interfaith dialogue? And both of these questions are coming on swinging. What do we do to overcome these challenges? And what is the most demanding or challenging thing about conversing with people from other faith communities?
The most challenging aspect is, and this is it, the real need to understand the art. Because there is sometimes faith communities, let's say that they apply, I don't want to say hypocrisy, but the idea, what we talk for in front of the others is different when we talk between us in our inner circle. So we need to understand that the faith, especially when you talk about the Abrahamic faith, it's a continuous faith, okay? From Abraham to Moses to Jesus to Muhammad. So this is very important to share what the real faith is and how the faith is going to help the community at large. Not in particular your own specific faith community, but how to serve the community at large, the whole. And this is one important thing. And if we want to achieve that, we have to move from this particular point in the faith to the worldview of the faith, what the faith promotes. Let's say from a Quranic perspective, it talks about God, the unity of God. God is the creator, the Almighty God. He is the creator of everything. He is the source of the truth. So we have to convey the message that we believe in one God. That's what the Quran said. When you have all the people of the book, come to a unified word between us and you, which is to believe God, in God and to worship Him. This is one thing. And from God, the revelation that God revealed to the prophets, it came to serve the entire human being, to live better, to respect each other, to coexist with each other, without giving judgmental, rules or judgments. We are not here, we are not God. We are the creator of God. He is the one who decides who's going to hell, going to heaven, by the way, not us. We cannot be doing it. So that's why Jesus, peace be upon him, in the Quran, he said that if you forgive them, they are your servants. If you punish them, you are the most powerful and most forgiving too. Yeah. So this is 2 points. And the other thing, also the point which challenged, the religious extremism in every religion, in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam. most of the time we find the religion hijacked by certain minor groups who promote very extreme view about the faith. And those who promote a very extreme view, they don't understand the worldview of the religion. They just go on particular text and they apply what fits them, what they like, what is good for them. And that's how we get this very misunderstanding or misconceptions either about Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. So when we apply and we look at the worldview or cosmetic, let's say, view and ideology, we look on the whole, then you can understand the real message of all faiths. They should come together and serve humanity. Now, in this postmodernism and this social media, we are out, by the way. Who is in control? Not the institution, not the university, not the church, not the mosques. It's the social media. That's one of the, I have my friend, he came from Algeria, he's professor of communication at the university. He shared with me such great views. One of the German philosophers, they talk about the gap now between the institutions we have and the young generation. So now you see what's going on. Atheism, people, they leave the religion everywhere, by the way. From Christianity, Judaism, Muslims, everywhere. Why? Because they have all that environment. Provide them the joy, could be unique, could be different stuff, but they are somewhere else. That gap, how to feel it, how the religious institution get in and serve and guide and help others. To have a better connection at least with God, with the universe, and with each other.
So I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with the challenge is that we live in a society that is very quick to, whoever screams the loudest gets the most press kind of thing. And what I mean by that is you end up with the extremists that end up dictating and defining. And so when you allow that to happen, the voices of faithful and the ones who are past the proof texting stage and taking bits and pieces of text and such, the supremacy type of extremism just absolutely challenges us to have interfaith. And I think it actually ripples into today's political realm, today's culture of, as I said in the opening statement, of the black and white thinking. We no longer critically think at times. I think that's a challenge to having interfaith dialogue, because the one thing that interfaith is based on is a true respect between all parties and a willingness to hear and accept our differences and understand that we're united in many, many ways, but we're also different in many ways, and it's okay. And so in a society that wants to define and make us think certain and specific ways about entire cultures, that challenges you when you come up and have the conversations that we are able to have up here today, because you're just becoming boxed in. And the one thing that I always, and I'll say this and finish it, is the challenge to interfaith is how small we may become through defining and dictating who God is. So I think it's important for us to widen our capacity and our understanding of God, and understand that we will never have the answers, that the immensity of God is unreal.
All right. These are beautiful responses. One thing that's really tough for me is when there are big, we can think hot button issues where we don't agree. So I'm a Jewish woman who works at a Catholic hospital. If you went on, and I'm a Reform rabbi, if you could go on to the Reform website and see political views that would be in conflict with the views that the Catholic hospital where I work holds, right? And so it can be really hard to hold those two things and be polite about it and respectful. And what I do is I try to remember that it all comes from a place of love. Even the person that I completely disagree with on a hot button issue, they're not coming from a place of hate. They're coming from just as much a place of love as I am. We've come to different conclusions, but at the end of the day, we've made those decisions because we believe in a God of love, and that God is encouraging us to love people in a particular way and to show that love in a particular way. So that's one of the things that I try to remember when I'm overcoming challenges. And okay, so I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit. So and this is not related to anybody on the stage, but being someone who's Jewish, one of the most difficult things with an interfaith dialogue is when I'm approached with something under the guise of interfaith dialogue, but is actually kind of a way of someone proving their Christianity to themselves. So Judaism can kind of get tricky with Christianity because what I would call the Bible, a Christian might call the Old Testament, right? And so we have this text in common, but where I find that it's a complete text, someone who's Christian might see it as something that is prophesizing the next step in a spiritual journey. And so if I'm in a conversation with someone who really just wants to prove to themselves that everything they've been taught about what I would call the Bible, what they would call the Old Testament, is correct, and their way is the only correct way, that becomes a really awkward conversation where I don't want to hurt their feelings or, it's nothing like that, but it feels like interfaith, but it's not quite interfaith. And so that's one of the hardest ones that I struggle with. So.
Thank you for those very, very rich answers. So I'm going to skip around a little bit because the answers have been so rich and so good that we are around. So I'm thinking.
Are you saying religious leaders like to talk?
No, I think that we have time for about one more because I do want to get the audience, give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. This one I think is probably something that is perhaps in the back of the minds of a lot of us today is have the recent events in Gaza, I should say, not have, but religious communities in any country, and certainly in the United States of America, can certainly face discrimination based on perceived notions about the community. So I just want to ask, do you face discrimination in your everyday life because of your religion, would you say? Have the events in Gaza made this worse? And on a sort of stepping out, the end of the question is, how are the unfolding events in Gaza affecting the communities that you all serve?
That's an easy question, right? Easy, yeah. It's, everything that happens, and it's important to understand, everything that happens in the world connects with us. That's why we're doing this, because we're all connected. And the events that we're dealing with are horrendous acts of violence, and they're challenging, but I think what we have to do and work towards in this kind of dialogue is exactly this. We have to have dialogue with each other in order to hopefully bring an end to the actions that are taking place. But it's a risk, right? We see it across the country going on right now with everything. But I want to tell you something. The first time I met this man, pure joy leapt out of my heart as we talked. And I just knew we were connected. And hopefully you feel the same way or not, but it's okay. But it is. And the same thing goes for Reverend Bundy. I tell the story that we emailed for 2 months before we met in person. And when we went to Shabbat, I thought, oh God, I hope she likes me, because we're gonna, and same exact thing. And you see, the problem is, I think, and when you're dealing with specific events like this, once again, we get to narrow our views, and we have to call out the horrendous acts. We can't sit on the sidelines, and we can't push that one off. Because if we don't, then what happens is nothing changes. And we're all up here to make the world a better place, because that's what our calling is. And sadly, discrimination and racial bias steeps as we go into these issues. But we have to continue to have these conversations, otherwise nothing will ever change. Nothing will ever be resolved if you're unwilling to have these comments and these dialogues. And so I think everything changes with the issue, but nothing should change because we have to live in that community.
So, this one's hard, and I guess please know that anything I say is very much what Jenny's views are and not, and no one else's. I haven't faced any more discrimination after October 7th and its aftermath. I would say I and many Jews live in fear, where we're watching like hawks what's going on in the country, how dialogues are playing out, and we're constantly trying to discern when we see a protest. Are people protesting a government and a government's actions, or are they protesting a religion? Is it anti-Israeli sentiment? Is it anti-Israeli government sentiment? Is it anti-Jewish sentiment? And so for many people, like myself included, and many people I talk to, we're kind of with bated breath, worrying, when our line's going to be crossed in terms of anti-Semitism. In terms of the wider Jewish community, what's going on in Israel and Gaza is tearing us apart. There is very little room for debate in the Jewish community. You are either supporting Israel or you are supporting a free Palestine, and there's very little dialogue in between. And the language is really strong on both sides. In our congregation, we have people that feel strongly on both sides, and trying to hold a congregation together is hard. I think one thing that people may not know that I want to express is baked into, insofar as Judaism has a culture, baked into Jewish culture is an idea of making connections. I think it comes from many of our ancestors were merchants and travelers, and so we even have something called Jewish geography, which is like the first time you meet somebody else who's Jewish, you go, oh, you're from San Francisco, do you know anybody who goes to Temple Emmanuel? And they would say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so. I went to camp with so-and-so, how is his mother doing, right? And you're constantly making these connections. And it's sort of reinforcing this idea that all the Jewish communities are connected and to an extent feel like family. And so when many Jews are thinking about what happened October 7th and then what's happening afterward, they're not seeing a foreign country where a terrorist action happened. They're seeing their family members hurt. And they're reacting as if it is a blood relative. And it's not to condone or support anything that has happened since, but I think the response has come from a very visceral place of pain. And I feel like I'm talking a lot, but we're in the middle of the holiday of Passover. And the number of emails I've gotten from different organizations that are saying, if you're a good Jew, you need to include language in your Seder that is about releasing hostages. Or a different email from a different organization that essentially says, if you're a good Jew, you need to include language about a ceasefire now and a free Palestine. And this idea that, it's this very sensitive issue, and there's just very little communication between these two sides, because I think they are both dealing with extreme pain because they're seeing the suffering of two different groups of people. Okay.
That's a hard question, by the way, but easy as well. So the idea, first to have interfaith, it doesn't mean to agree on each point, right? We may disagree, but that's the beauty, how we agree to disagree. That's one. The second, after what happened after October 7 and what happened in Gaza, we didn't face any trouble in what it is. Maybe few very limited incidents, but it's not that bad. And we have very good connections with interfaith. We have very good connection with the rabbi there in what it is. Even before she released the press release, she contacted me and she sent me the press release to look at it. I disagree with her at some point. Told her if you want to go and I said that's okay. So we have no problem. She has her view. She supports, let's say, the Israeli government, but I don't. I support the unity. Because the Gaza issue is not an Islamic issue. Is not to be Muslim or Christian or Jew to support the oppressed there anyway. It's not, because Gaza problem is not the Gaza the issue of 7 October, okay? It's like 75 years of occupation. That's reality. Either to hide it or to expose it, that's the reality. Because the occupation in Palestine is the longest occupation ever now, still existing. So it's still there. But prior to that, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Palestine was the focal place for the coexistence between the three faiths. So we had, in the whole, let's say, the history of Muslims, there is no problem. The Jews, they live there, and the Christians, they live there, and the Muslims, they live there, neighbor to each other. The same thing not only there, not only there in Andalus, if you study the history of Andalusia, Muslims and Jews and Christians, they were there together for 800 years. Till extremists somewhere, they have troubles, what happened. That's why we have Christian Jews in North Africa, from Morocco to Algeria to Yemen to Egypt to Iraq, everywhere they live together, there is no trouble. So then the other question they talk about was the relationship between politics and religion. Here is the issue. Basically, the faith or the religion comes to bring values and ethics to politics. But the problem now, the politicians, they use the religion for their own interest. And that's what happened in several, you could name it. We have to go beyond what we see. I don't believe the media, by the way. What the media said is totally different. It's scanned, whatever news coming out has to be scanned, approved, or by some people. We are in a free country. We have to understand what's beyond that, what's behind that. And as a human being, we have, as a Muslim or a human being, we have to defend the oppressed, whoever they are. I'm against killing the civilians from any race, any religion. It's against Islamic values, Islamic faith, Islamic principles. At the same time, all human beings were created free. All of us were created free, just being slave to God. Servant to God, not to anybody. There is no preference, as the Prophet Muhammad said, in the last sermon, before he died, O mankind, all of you are from Adam, and Adam is from dirt. There is no preference of a white person over a black person, or a black person over a white person, or an Arab over a non-Arab, or Arab over an Arab over an Arab. All of you are the same. And the best among you are those the most conscious, the most dear to God, the most kind people in the sight of God. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. So thank you so much for those really great answers and very thoughtful. Yes. So we're going to open it up now to questions from the audience. So please.
Covenants are so important, so foundational. And I was wondering if you could compare and contrast God's covenant with Abraham and Isaac on the one hand, and God's covenant with Ishmael on the other. I really want to know.
I mean, from the Quranic view, I mean, Abraham, we know, he has two sons. So, I mean, Isaac, God named him Ghulam Alim. God gave you a boy, a knowledgeable boy. And when he gave him the good news about Ishmael, he said, Ghulam Halim, forbearant boy. So they represent different aspects. And I mean, the covenant with Abraham, which came later on, what we call the Ten Commandments in all the faiths, in Judaism, Christianity, and also in Islam, basically is the same. Those Ten Commandments, the commandments are more than 10 anyway. But also, here we have to focus not on the rules, because the problem when we get in troubles, either in interfaith or judging people, we just focus on the rules. This is forbidden, this is a must, this is disbeliever, this is a believer. It's not your business, by the way. So the bottom line of the faith or the covenants of Abraham is how to insert the values and the morality in the human actions, in the institutions, in the governments. So when we get those God's values which are given in the Torah, in the Bible, in the Quran, then people, they will get better. I remember one of the professors, he's originally from Palestine. He was a professor at the Yale University, and he was assassinated in the 1980s. So he has his PhD or master's from McGill University in Canada called the Christian Ethics. Basically, he studied Christianity in a deep and profound way, and he derived from that text the real values of Christianity from the Bible, from the New Testament and the Old Testament, which represent Christianity. I mean, the values are shared, but the problem is interpretation and how to use it. Okay?
Okay, so I would recommend when you get home to watch a video by a rabbi. Her name is B'nai Lappi, and she calls it the Crash Talk. And the whole, it's great. And the whole premise of it is things that any belief system, as it is, will inevitably crash. And I say this because, right, God makes this promise, you will be as numerous as the stars, I will always be with you, this land will be yours. And then we get to like 70 CE, like, oops, you know, like Romans, hi, you know, it doesn't work, right? And so, So like, what do you do? Like, what do you do with this covenant? Do we make God mad? Did we should we have backed Zeus? Like, was he the right guy? You know, and so part of Judaism is reinterpreting and saying, okay, it wasn't the covenant like that. It was more covenantal, where we kind of broke the covenant, and so like it's conditional, and so we have to we change, we modify. And so to me, this idea of who's the rightful inheritor of this covenant, I think it's kind of a moving target, and things change. Nothing ever stays the same, right? And so I guess that's how I approach the idea of a covenant, of maybe trying to be worthy of a covenant, but it doesn't necessarily mean supremacy like the way it's presented in the 5 books of Moses.
I like being between you right now. I don't know what you and John. So the way I look at it with the covenant is I love to think of it as actually God's calling to us to be willing to do this work together, right? I don't think there's a preference in that piece of the puzzle, if that makes sense. It's as each of you talked about, right? The challenge is to follow the covenant in our ethos and in the way that we live, right? And to understand it. It's more of a commitment to living our ethics out. Bashir mentioned Christian ethics, and I think that's absolutely where the covenant leads us to, is living that life that stands for what I would say are the values that we're taught through our faith, you know. And one of those values, as I read the covenant, is that we will always stand with the oppressed, the broken, the lost. And so those covenants are extremely important to remember. And I think if we actually understood the depth of and the connections, I think we would actually learn to agree to disagree some more and work together on things. So I get to play both sides of this, right? So.
Okay. I'll let Tom know that. That's going to be in the minute. We have one in the back after.
First, thank you for the conversation. I want to bring up a point that I think is germane to what we're looking at tonight. There's a fundamental unity in the idea of the book of Luke that tells us we're supposed to love God with all our heart and all our strength, and that we're to love our neighbor. And yet today, there seems to be a fundamental crisis with the understanding of what is our neighbor. And I think that's one of the greatest difficulties we're having today. How would you say that we speak to these people? You're talking about extremist people, or to help people understand that we're all our neighbors.
I have good stuff. I will promise. When I moved to I bought a house like 2 years ago. Then what I did the first few weeks, I invited all my neighbors. So we did a feast, by the way. We did couscous. You know, have you heard about couscous? Yeah, you know. Couscous, we different stuff. We invite them and they come in the backyard. We make very good events. They eat and they drink. And my neighbors, they told me, man, you should do this every week. I love it. So the question, when I asked them, do you know this? He said, no. Do you know that? No. They don't know each other. They have been there for 20, 30 years. And they are neighbors. So I took it from the prophetic view. The prophet said, Gabriel, kept advising me to take care of your neighbor, till I thought he is going to inherit me after I die. So in Islam, we think about the neighbor doesn't need to be a Muslim neighbor or a relative neighbor. You have different priority. Let's say your neighbors who is from your faith, from your family, blood family, he is closer, okay? Then you get another neighbor, religious person who are believing in God, maybe he's next there, or the neighbor, all of those are neighbors. Even one of the sayings said 40 homes from this side, 40 homes from this side, from four sides, 40 homes, and the whole city are your neighbors. See, if you practice that, just to practice it, if you put it in practice, basically there is no violence within it. There is no hatred within it. I have 40, how much? 100 what? 160 from all sides. So if we have that, we build a strong community. But when we come to practice, that's a different story. Yeah. Even in the Quran said, وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى, your neighbors, the closest neighbor should take care of him. So.
I'm going to answer this a little bit in the weeds too. So you hear that we need the 10 Commandments in the courthouse, right? We need that, right? By the way, I don't think we do. But what I think would be great to put in the courthouse is the Sermon on the Mount. And when it says, love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemy. Now, just as Bashir said, and Jenny, I'm sure we all are in agreement in this sense, is the narrow-minded definition of neighbor, Tom, has become absolutely ridiculous. That we only like our neighbor if they think like us, look like us, act like us, da-da-da, right? Well, that's just malarkey. And if we look from our standpoint, from the gospel standpoint, how often did Jesus use the example of the person who was the least likely neighbor to care for and to love? You know, and that's what we have to get to. Just as Bashir said, if we could follow that command, there would be nothing to talk about in Gaza and Israel, but there also would be nothing to talk about in our political system as well. We see it so often, and this is why we have to have these conversations. This is absolutely what, to me, for me, central to my faith construct. That the neighbor, who's defined, I spent 19 years in a small rural church. Now I'm here. My neighbors here look very different than my neighbors at Verdun. Amazing people at Verdun, amazing people here. But as I said earlier, and I'm going to use this as an example, I walked into the Islamic Center in the Quad Cities, and Bashir gave me a hug when we finished. In fact, I think I told him that the sermon he gave, I could have gave at whatever church I'm preaching at this week, right? And Jenny, same thing. The hospitality you showed us when we went, right? It's. I don't understand where it became hard to be hospitable to each other, but that's where we have to get back to. You know, we have to get back to where and part of that is we got to get back to where we enjoy our lives and we enjoy our neighbors because we see our neighbors. I think the extremist views have truly turned us into where we don't see the humanity in our neighbor, and we're called to see humanity. So sorry, I talked a lot.
You're good. I think I'll start by saying I absolutely agree. Right, we have this beautiful line in Genesis, right? We were all created in God's image. And so, yeah, we should see every single human being as made in God's image. In terms of teaching people that we're all made in God's image, I think is a much bigger ask. And my gut tells me it goes back to people's actions, I hope, come out of love. Even the most vicious things we disagree with, you know, if we're talking socio-political, you name it, we can make the assumption they're saying this thing we super disagree with because they think because from them it comes from a place of love, right? Like, if we imagine best motives for a war, people are fighting their side of the war because they love their views and their people, and they are fighting for the people that they love. And the other side's doing the exact same thing. And so when we see something horrific on the news, which is a daily thing of people being inhuman to each other, we're not going to make progress by sort of wagging our finger at them and being like, dude, be nice, right? They think they are. and I think it's heartbreaking, right? Like, it's right? But it's true. I mean, I think anywhere, and if you go back to what's going on in Israel and Gaza, it makes me cry. Like, I tell people I have to decide which half of my heart I need to harden on which, like, when I wake up in the morning, because I can't hold the pain of two different nations who are trying to live, and it's not working right now, right? It's not. It's not sustainable what's going on. It is heartbreaking, and innocent people are dying, and it breaks my heart. But both sides believe they're trying to protect their loved ones, and that's really, really hard to get that to come to the table.
Hello. The average American, I think, doesn't realize that your three religions come from a common genesis. And so how do we go about showing them? Specifically, the average American can't just pick up a Quran and actually read the true word of the prophet. The Torah has to be read ritualistically. In the Christian Bible, we know that there are so many translations that it's hard to get a good read on what that word is. So how do we get the average American to realize that your three religions are from a common source, and do you think that will help the problem?
From my perspective, I mean, if you want to learn about Islam, go and read the Quran. It's in Arabic, but the translation. By the way, I brought some there in the car if you want to come from here. Anybody want to read it, you can bring it here. And some brochures to know about Islam. It's good to go directly to know that religion directly, not through mediation. Okay, that's very important. The same thing if you want to go to learn about Judaism, go to them. I attended several Saturday circles with the rabbi. We were talking about Abraham, about Isaac and his wife, and I got discussion with them about Lot and stuff like that. Wow, Lot is a prophet. Our faith is not a prophet. Okay, that makes sense. The story is there. I mean, if you go directly to the same source, the same thing to the Christianity. I remember I was in Connecticut. I had two rabbis, friends. He said, I should teach you the Torah and teach me the Quran. He said, that's a good chance, but it didn't stay that much there. So that's very important. Go to the source and learn about it. So basically, if you read the Quran, you will understand most of the Christian faith and most of the Jewish faith. Because as the last one came, they talk about more about Jesus, more about Moses than Muhammad. And all the stories of Jesus, I mean, in the Quranic perspective, is a little bit different than the Bible, as Jesus is one of the most important and chosen prophets of God. He talked about it in that term. So I mean, that's the way, the best way to go and read and see and how the Quran talk and call all the people of the book and honor the people of the book, come to a common ground between us, to worship only God and not to enslave or humiliate each other. That's beautiful. So basically, we talk about God, talk about the human. The human is very central in the Quranic perspective. Talk about God, the human, on earth and this universe. Basically, all the scholars from, let's say, the Middle Ages in Europe, which was the Golden Age in Andalus, a guy called Ibn Rushd Averroes. He's the teacher of all the scholars of Europe who brought what we call al-Anwar, what we call the Enlightenment in Europe. He is the main guy who translated the philosophy of Aristotle and Plato and released them or purified them from those connections with polytheism in verse. He's the one who brought philosophy to the modern world. He talked at that time, God has two books. The written book, which is revealed to the prophets. Let's say you want to talk about the book of Moses, is the Torah. God revealed the Torah to Moses. You want to talk the Bible, the gospel God revealed to Jesus. Talk to the Quran, that's the book that you can read. But the other book, which is another seen book, is this universe. And that's how the Quran talks. Look at the signs, call them the signs of the book like verses, and the signs on the universe also like verses. You could read them and see them and reflect and connect yourself with that. So we have some, I can ask the guys to bring it here.
So Josh, that's a fantastic question. And the one word answer obviously is education, and true education with each other. And being willing to see and explore each other's faiths and learn from each other's faith. The biggest thing, and I forgot, I haven't mentioned this tonight, the biggest thing I always like to tell people is that we don't have all the answers. I had a wonderful seminary professor tell me one time that what an MDiv degree does for you is it teaches you to ask better questions so you can learn more things. And if you learn more things, you ask more questions. And that's what we have to do, Josh. We have to educate people in that way where we truly learn from each other, walk with each other, read critically and engaged, and have these kind of conversations. Don't be afraid to talk to people, because on my journey through this wonderful thing called life, the people who have taught me and helped me are a multitude, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have amazing people teach me to open my mind to others, right, and to see the depth of things. And I think right now, one of the problems we have is that narrowness that we talked about earlier. So that would be education budget.
I think I'll add, I sometimes describe when people ask me about being a rabbi, I'll say, there's many ways up the mountain, and I was trained on how to be a trail guide up the Jewish way. And then so I think there's truth and there's beauty in every tradition. Rumi takes my breath away every time I read something of his. There's truth in all the traditions, and beautifully they all do have that golden rule of do unto others in every single one. I think the one thing I wanted to mention with your question about the similar origin is just being careful to remember each tradition is sort of fully fledged, right? So Judaism isn't the prequel to Christianity. Christianity isn't the prequel to Islam. All three are sort of fully formed faith traditions. They can learn from each other and grow with each other, but they're sort of fully formed, each one.
Okay. Should I take one more question? We're running out of time. Is that okay? Okay, very good.
Okay for 2 more questions? I promise I'm time-wise, so.
Okay, on the subject of Israel's war right now, mainly this question is based. Paul in the Christian scriptures says that we don't fight against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces in high places. Do you agree with that? And what do you think of that verse?
Yeah, it was from Paul, so sorry, you get to field it first.
I missed part of that, I'm sorry. Just the scripture text, your quotation.
Okay, regarding wars in general, but specifically Israel's war right now, I look to the Christian scriptures where the Apostle Paul says we don't fight against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces in high places. And I was wondering, do you agree with that? How do you think that's affecting the war in Gaza? And I don't know what book that comes from. I can't, is it Romans?
Well, I'd have to look to make sure I'm saying it right. So, but with Paul, it's interesting because there's so many layers to the letters of Paul and the pseudo letters of Paul, and that's getting way too deep probably. But it's so when you look at that though, it's really hard to take one verse out and say this is what is, right? And sadly, that's actually what happens often. So my best answer for that would be, I don't think that has anything to do with what's going on in Israel and Gaza, just to be real honest with you. I also am very emphatic when I talk to students or anybody who will listen in my family, do not take scripture out of context and do not use it as a battering ram of some sorts, right? And so when you do that, because along that verse, those verses, there's about 12 other verses around there that are talking about this entity, right, or this whole piece of the puzzle. And so we have to be really careful with how we proof text that. Does that help you at all?
I will look it up when I go home.
And read the entire, and also know that of course, for the Gospels, remember that they weren't printed with verses and numbers, and so oftentimes the starting of the text is not verse 1, it's verse 30 in the chapter before, kind of a thing. So try to find that place, if that helps you.
Thank you. We have one more.
What is one of the most difficult but important things you have to keep in mind when speaking to other religious leaders?
Respect. Honoring. Each of these wonderfully beautiful people have said it tonight, that remembering that we each hold to a tradition, and that means that we're going to have to agree to disagree at times. It also means that we honor each other's tradition for being what it is, not trying to mold it into ours, and so when you have dialogue with other faiths, I always think of a beautiful quote by Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop from South Africa that sadly we just lost, but not just 2 years ago now, but he said Gandhi wasn't Christian and God wasn't mad at Gandhi for not being Christian because God's not Christian. All faith and all people give us a gift to see the immensity and the diversity and the wonder of God as big as God can become. I added a little bit more at the end there. But I try to remember that whenever I go into a dialogue with another religious leader, is that I want to respect them for who they are. And I also go in knowing that I'm kind of a knucklehead, so I'm there to learn and to grow with them. And and I've been blessed by both of these to learn, both of these wonderful people. And so when you do that, I think that reminds us that we're constantly growing. And so you respect and you're open to one another.
I think it's a communication issue, right? Because before, when you want to talk to somebody, you have to create a rapport, at least so the other party will open up to you, and same thing, you open up to the person. Especially with the Abrahamic faith, the best thing to start with is to share the common points, the similarities. We have a lot of in common than the differences. So if we start talking about that and understand that, that would be a great way, to break a lot of ice. You know, many people say, do you believe in Jesus? Is Jesus in your book? Okay, we have Mary, the chapter of Mary, the chapter of Bani Israel, you know, the children of Israel, the chapter. And Moses was mentioned so many times, and Aaron and his mom's story, the chapter of Al-Qasas, the story is basically about Moses, when Pharaoh killed all the boys and kept alive the girls, and how Moses was saved when his mom put him in a box, dropped him in the river, and took him to. It's a lot of similarities when you start with that. So basically, you will know each other. You will know that the other party knows about you. So that's the beginning, and that's how we start. That's my way anyway. I have to start that.
And I'll just add, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I learned this term in December called open curiosity, which means if you're going to engage in a dialogue, especially a difficult dialogue, you need to go in with open curiosity, which means I'm not trying to change your mind and you're not trying to change mine. We're just trying to listen to each other. And if we're not in a space to do that, like let's talk about the weather instead, or something like that. But really remembering open curiosity means listening and not trying to change someone else's opinion.
We had a few days ago, in high school, like a career show there. Me and another priest from the Baptist church and Rabbi Linda from the Jewish. So she brought some stuff, a plate. I thought she brought food, but it ended to be one piece of each. Some pair of potato and some bone of lamb bone and different stuff. I thought, what's that? Can you tell me about that? She loves to explain. She explained a lot. Even my friend, he's a guest. What does it mean there? And especially when she said about the tails of potato, they represent the Holocaust. When people in Germany, they find what to eat and representing that and stuff. It's good to ask somebody, as she said, Rabbi, out of your curiosity, listen, learn. We are a learner till we die. Never say, I know everything. If you think you know, you are ignorant. That's one of the sayings the Prophet Muhammad said, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. That's it. Keep learning, guys. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So I just wanted to say, and I'll say this again in a minute, but thank you so much. And in the spirit of honoring both our commonalities and our differences, our three guests tonight have agreed to share a blessing for us and from their own faith community in parting.
Yeah, so in Judaism, we don't do extemporaneous prayer very much, at least not when we're in the synagogue. So I wanted to share, there's a traveler's prayer. So as you all go home tonight and you travel home, may it be your will, O God, and God of our ancestors, that you lead us toward peace, guide our footsteps toward peace, and make us reach our desired destination for life, gladness, and peace. May you rescue us from the hand of every foe ambushed along the way, and from all manner of punishments that assemble to come to earth. May you send blessing in our handiwork, and grant us grace, kindness, and mercy in your eyes, and the eyes of all who see us. May you hear the sound of our humble request, because you are God who hears prayer requests. Blessed are you, O God, who hears prayer.
I will share with you the first chapter of the Quran. We have some copies in the Mouse, and you see that, called Al-Fatiha, the opening. Beautiful start is starting with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Shape first two attributes of God. I will do it in Arabic, and the Quran is in Arabic. I will do it translated in English. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise be to God, the Lord of the worlds, the most gracious, the most merciful, the Lord of the day of judgment. You only we worship, and you only we seek refuge and support. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you bestow your mercy on, not those who go astray, nor those who earn your anger. Then at the end we say Ameen, which is the same, by the way. Amen, okay? Assalamu alaikum. Shalom alaikum. Peace be with you.
I'm going to share with you my favorite blessing from St. Francis. May God bless you with discomfort and easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, for freedom, and for peace for all. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand and comfort them and turn their pain into joy. And this is my favorite part. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world, so that you can do what others cannot do alone, to bring justice and kindness to all children and to all the poor. May God bless you and keep you this evening. Amen. And if you would, as we close, please give a round of applause for Josh, our moderator.
Thank you. Applause are due here. So,
Also, I have been blessed to come back to Monmouth College to be the chaplain. I come in a long line of chaplains. One, who is the main reason I'm here, lives about 3 blocks down. I always honor her wherever I go, because she's the one that taught me the importance of doing this work. Monmouth College has a reputation and an honor and a heritage to fulfill, and that is to live into the love of God. And please thank Imam Bashir and Rabbi Bundy for joining us. Thank you all for coming, and if you have any questions or anything, I'll volunteer to stay here.